It's a great honor to introduce our speaker today, who helped pave the way to coeducation at the University of Notre Dame. She was in the first class of women accepted at the University of Notre Dame, and I'm sure there's some very interesting stories about that I would definitely like to hear. I don't know if we'll hear any of that today. She graduated in 1975, magna cum laude, from Notre Dame, and also married Frank, who is another Notre Dame grad. And after graduation, she pursued a career in sales and sales management at Pitney Bowes and IBM until 1986. Since retirement, she's focused her time with both family and also looks like quite extensive volunteer work. In 1996, Lynn was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she didn't sit still with this. Once she completed her treatment, she got up and started organizing seminars for her community about the importance of early detection. She started a support group 17 years ago now that has over 70 members. And it's actually, in the context of the support group, it's really not uncommon for Lynn to accompany a newly diagnosed breast cancer patient to their treatment. It's always helpful to have another set of ears when you have a lot of questions in unfamiliar territory. She also speaks regularly to high school teens in San Diego about the importance of breast health and maintaining an active interest in your health care. She has a huge long list of awards, just a couple of them. In 2002, she was the recipient of the Notre Dame Club of San Diego Community Service Award. In 2006, she received the Breastlink Spirit Award. And in 2008, Cancer Care in New York City awarded Lynn the Donor of the Year Award for organizing an international event on triple-negative breast cancer. Lynn passionately promises she will not stop her outreach until women no longer die of breast cancer. So please join me in providing a warm welcome for Lynn Flanagan.
What a thrill to be back at Notre Dame. My love of my alma mater, Notre Dame, and passion for breast cancer education propelled me to leave 75-degree San Diego, California, to come to the snow of South Bend, but more importantly, to speak to all of you today. In addition, 18 years ago, I made a promise to Father Theodore Hesburgh at a breast cancer event honoring the Notre Dame pioneer women, we who blazed the trail to coeducation back in 1972. That day, I had the honor of sharing the podium with Father Hesburgh. He told of his family history of both breast and ovarian cancer. And he said it was time to start talking openly at Our Lady's University about these diseases. At that time, I pledged to Father Hesburgh that I would speak about these diseases until they no longer exist. Now I'd like to take you back 18 years to 1996. Frank, my husband, and I were frantically parenting 3 wonderful, active children. Our oldest son, Michael, was a sophomore in high school at the time. Our son, Patrick, who's here with us today, was only in 5th grade. And our daughter, Laura, was a little 2nd grader. In October of that year, after dropping the children off at school, I went in for my annual mammogram. The radiologist report said, "Lynn, you are perfectly fine, and you do not need another mammogram for 2 more years." But while I was there, I felt as though my guardian angel nudged me and said, "Lynn, request a physical exam while you're here. Request a clinical breast exam." And sure enough, during that exam, the nurse discovered 2 lumps, 2 palpable masses in my left breast. that had not shown up on the mammogram. One sheet guided my fingertips to those lumps. They were so apparent. And if I had been doing my own personal monthly breast exam, I would have easily found them. The imaging staff at the mammography center said, "Lynn, you need to go speak to your gynecologist." I visited my doctor, and she too felt those 2 lumps. She instructed me to wait until my next menstrual period, and then on day 7, do another real careful clinical exam. I did my exam at that point, and much to my dismay, both of those lumps were unchanged. Then my doctor sent me in for an ultrasound. In early November is when that ultrasound was performed. And frankly, I knew the results of the ultrasound were not favorable when the radiologist took an absolute eternity to come out and speak to me. He said, "Lynn, we had hoped to be able to tell you that they were cysts, fluid-filled sacs. However, they were both solid masses, requiring further investigation by a breast cancer surgeon." Now, how could this be possible? Didn't I have a negative, perfectly clear mammogram? Frank and I saw the breast surgeon, and she too felt the lumps. She decided to perform fine needle aspiration biopsies on both of those masses. Now, over the next few days, I became a voracious reader of absolutely anything and everything that I could find about that fine needle aspiration biopsy procedure. I guess it was that intensity that I acquired as a Notre Dame graduate. I kept reading that if the physician did not place that needle in the correct spot during that aspiration biopsy, we could get a false result. In addition, I read that future cancerous growth could start to develop in an area that we believe to be non-cancerous. A few days later, my surgeon called, and she gleefully announced that both of those biopsies were negative. I shook my head and I said, "I'm a type A personality, and I won't have peace of mind until you remove both of those lumps completely." At that moment, I was struck by the realization that the days of the physician making all the decisions were over. This was truly an interactive process between the physician and myself. Now, no surprise to this Notre Dame Pink Zone audience that scheduling the excisional biopsies or lumpectomies was dictated by none other than the Notre Dame football schedule. Notre Dame was coming out to the Coliseum for the annual Notre Dame USC football game. Many of our extended family was coming to the game, as well as Thanksgiving. And so, naturally, the surgery had to be scheduled for after the football game. The surgery was a lumpectomy, 2 separate lumpectomies. It was an outpatient procedure under a local anesthetic. And during that surgery, my surgeon finally removed both of those lumps completely. I was back at the gym the next day. Then on Saturday, December 7th, a date I will always remember, we just came in the door from being at church where our daughter Laura had received the sacrament of reconciliation. The phone was ringing off the hook, and it was my surgeon with the results of that biopsy. She had the task of informing me that one of the lumps was a harmless fibroadenoma. The other contained 2 small spots of invasive lobular carcinoma. I had breast cancer at age 43. The average age of diagnosis of breast cancer is 62. I was absolutely shocked by the news. Neither my mother nor my father's side of the family has any history of breast cancer. And yet, I now know only 40% of breast cancer patients have a family history of breast cancer. And only a minuscule fraction, only 5 to 10%, actually have the genetic mutation like Angelina Jolie. The remaining 60%, like me, have no history of breast cancer. Now, I have none of the standard risk factors. A woman is at higher risk if she starts her menstrual periods before age 12, if she continues to cycle beyond the age of 55, if she never bears a child, or if her first child is born after age 30. I had Michael at age 28. It has been suggested that nursing can provide some protection against breast cancer, and I nursed all 3 of our children. I eat a high-fiber, low-fat diet. I have never smoked. I do not drink, and I do not consume alcohol. The origin of my breast cancer remained an enigma until I attended a conference given by the colorful, controversial expert on breast cancer, Dr. Susan Love. At that event, Dr. Love stated, hormones such as hormone replacement therapy used to reduce the side effects of menopause can increase risk. She even said that fertility drugs and oral contraceptives could play an influential role long-term in breast cancer. Unfortunately, my own darling mom, a St. Mary's graduate who just turned 94, along with 5 to 10 million other women in the late 1930s through 1971, took a form of estrogen, DES, when she was pregnant with me, hoping to prevent miscarriage. Now, cervical cancer, infertility, and premature labor are documented side effects from DES exposure. But anyone whose mother or grandmother took DES must also be cautious about breast cancer. Recently, the Center for Disease Control announced DES exposure in utero doubled my chances of developing breast cancer in my 40s. I realize I will never know with absolute certainty what caused my breast cancer. However, I do know that no woman should ever feel exempt from this disease. Even though my breast cancer surgeon got clear margins around the cancer, I was not off the hook yet for treatment. Because I had an invasive breast cancer, I still needed 2 levels of lymph nodes to be removed from underneath my arm. I had that general anesthesia surgery on January 3rd, and to my tremendous relief, all 17 of those lymph nodes were negative. They were negative primarily because my breast cancer was discovered so early. Can you imagine if I elected to wait and monitor those 2 palpable lumps? My treatment would have been much more extensive and my prognosis radically different. I still required 35 radiation treatments over 7 weeks. Right after I dropped my adorable children off at school, I went to radiation. After treatment, I drove myself directly to the gym. Exercise was a tremendous outlet, and it provided me the energy to keep up with the family schedule. I still drove all my carpools, attended swim meets, basketball, soccer, and baseball games, and oversaw homework at night. Another source of strength was the constant flow of notes, flowers, meals, and prayers from all my family and my friends. Being spoiled really kept my spirits up. The last part of my treatment did not include chemotherapy, since my cancer was early stage, but I did require a medication, tamoxifen, for 5 years to suppress any estrogen which was fueling the growth of my cancer. After those 5 years, I had a complete hysterectomy for a variety of reasons. And to tell you the truth, it was actually a blessing, because finally those ovaries, those estrogen-producing ovaries, were gone. And here I am today, 18 years later, feeling peppy as a Notre Dame student. However, not exactly looking like one anymore. I am still followed meticulously for breast cancer recurrence or a second breast cancer. Unlike some cancers, there really is no magic to a breast cancer survivor's 5th anniversary from diagnosis. We survivors need to be followed for the rest of our lives. Last week, I listened to a superb program put on by Cancer Care out of New York City. They were providing us all the updates from the San Antonio Breast Cancer Consortium that takes place each year. 5 very prominent breast oncologists were speaking, and I was so struck by a comment that Dr. Generosa Grana made, and she said, "We must improve our surveillance of breast cancer survivors in their 2nd decade." It's incumbent upon all of us as patients as well as medical professionals to utilize every possible diagnostic technique at our disposal. I still do my monthly breast self-exam. I see my breast surgeon for a clinical breast exam every 6 months. I follow her all the way up to Orange County. We live in San Diego. I get my labs drawn every 6 months and see my medical oncologist. And I march in for my annual mammogram. Because I had invasive lobular carcinoma, which confers increased risk of a second breast cancer, and because I am extremely dense-breasted, I also receive an annual MRI. Now, very recently, dense breast tissue has been deemed the 3rd most significant risk factor for breast cancer, only behind being a woman and getting older. Not only does this dense tissue make a developing breast cancer much more difficult to see on a mammogram, but it grows in a manner conducive to breast cancer development. I encourage every woman to, when you go in for that next mammogram, to find out if you are dense-breasted. And if so, talk to your medical team about adding additional screening modalities. As the years passed and I became more knowledgeable about breast cancer, I slowly grasped just how blessed I was to have discovered my breast cancer so early. Now that I have taken you on my roller coaster with breast cancer, I would like to highlight 3 issues of paramount importance when dealing with a breast cancer diagnosis. First, the role of early detection. Second, taking ownership of your own health. And third, the impact of emotional and spiritual support systems on your recovery. The importance of early detection is critical. Unfortunately, early detection of breast cancer is complex because in today's world, there is no single definitive test to determine if a woman has breast cancer, nor is there a precise exam to discern if the breast cancer has returned. Some cancers like mine are palpable. You can feel them, but they do not readily present on a mammogram. Others cannot be felt and are easy to see on a mammogram. I believe all survivors and healthy women must take advantage of all 3 methods of detection. An annual mammogram starting at age 40. And if for some reason your insurance doesn't provide for that, or you do not have a plan that allows you to get one at 40, and increasingly I'm finding that quite a few plans don't let one get one till they're 50. You know what? Save up your money and pay cash and get that annual mammogram. I recommend an annual clinical breast exam done by a medical professional. And when you have it done this year, and this is from the time a woman has adequate breast tissue. So when I speak to my high school students, I tell them when you go in for your next physical, ask that doctor to do a physical exam of your breast tissue. The youngest age of diagnosis of any young person I know out in California is age 16, and we lost that beautiful young girl. So when you go in and have your physical examination done, have your doctor instruct you on how to properly examine your breast tissue. And finally, every woman should be doing that monthly breast exam every single month. This exam takes only 10 minutes and could save your life. Remember, 75% of breast lumps are found by the woman herself. We have to use every diagnostic technique available to catch this disease early. The second lesson I have learned is to take ownership of your own health. Ask for copies or digital records of all medical reports, especially test results. Study them and know what they mean. Because if you have cancer, you will have choices to make about your treatment. These are highly individualized decisions, and if you're well informed, your decisions will be that much easier. I highly recommend seeking second opinions. Most insurance plans now provide for a second opinion. And if you have a complicated diagnosis, seek an oncology team that specializes in breast cancer. We need to be our own personal advocate. The third realization I have gleaned is your emotional and spiritual support systems can make a significant difference in your recovery. My family has been tremendous. When I was initially diagnosed at age 43, all I could think about is, would I see our young family grow up? Wonderful, happy, responsible adults. But the good Lord has kept me around long enough to be a Grammy. My husband of almost 40 years, Frank, who I met freshman year at Notre Dame, has been my anchor throughout the entire Odyssey and continues to support my outreach to the community. Michael, our 2003 Notre Dame graduate, who is now 34, a husband and dad, was only 15 when I was diagnosed. We included him in all the details of my diagnosis, and he even wrote a paper for his biology class on the medication I would be taking for 5 years. It was Michael who accompanied me to a 3D breast MRI. And also, my Michael was the one who had such a capacity for letting me share my fears and was never impatient or embarrassed by me when I shed a few tears. Patrick, our Santa Clara undergraduate, is right there, and an MBA recipient from the College School of Management at Northwestern, was only 11 at the time. One of his memorable comments pertained to my radiation. Now, when a person receives radiation for breast cancer, a few permanent tattoos must be drawn on the skin to mark the field being radiated. When Patrick, our basketball player, got wind of this, he announced that his mother was getting just like Dennis Rodman. On another occasion, Patrick delighted me when he asked me, "Mom, how many of those pills are you going to be taking?" And then he got busy doing his calculations, and he announced, "Mom, you're going to be taking 3,650 of those pills." And it was Patrick, the watchdog, who every morning made sure that I took those pills. Now, is there any wonder that Patrick got both his CPA and his MBA? Our daughter Laura, a Santa Clara University graduate, was only 8 during this period. But she brightened up many a dreary moment with her innocent little comments. I'll never forget how worried Laura was right before that second surgery. I peered down into her beautiful chocolate brown eyes and I said, "Laura, why are you so worried?" And she said to me, "Mommy, is a man working on your breasts?" I smiled and reassured my tiny daughter that my breast surgeon was a woman, that she's a mom, and that she also had 3 daughters, one named Laura. My daughter perked up and went right out to play. And it was my daughter Laura, from the time she was 8 years old until she left for college, who helped out at all the early detection of breast cancer seminars that I organized throughout San Diego County. Finally, the spiritual dimension plays a vital role. My dad, who attended the University of Notre Dame Law School, frequently reminded me during my childhood, every gray cloud has a silver lining. The silver lining for me has been a deepening of my faith. God's timing to reveal my breast cancer was ideal. Our daughter Laura received her first Holy Communion that year. Our son Michael was confirmed in the Catholic faith. And before my second surgery, we as a family all received a blessing. And now that all of our children are grown and I have more available time, I know that the good Lord's plan for Lynn Flanagan is to minister to others with a breast cancer diagnosis. I want to thank you here at Notre Dame, and particularly the College of Science and the Notre Dame women's basketball team, and all of you who are somehow associated with this wonderful Pink Zone event, for providing me yet another opportunity to keep my promise to to Father Theodore Hesburgh. And let's all follow Father Hesburgh's recommendation and keep talking about this disease. And together, we can all be triumphant in our fight against breast cancer. Thank you very much.